That was in 1967 now. But my dad talked about his aunt would give him a dime, and with that dime he could go to a theater, buy the ticket and a Coke and a bag of popcorn. Oh, the bag of popcorn was large, and the Coke was a fairly large glass of Coke. Yeah, all for a dime. Yes.
You like eat salt popcorn or sweet popcorn?
What's that?
Do you like to eat sweet popcorn or salt popcorn?
I don't like salt popcorn.
Me too.
I don't know. All right. Corn is one of the least nutritious foods there are, but it's cheap and it's abundant. All right. And it's low calorie, and popcorn, you can lose weight eating popcorn, but not the best way to do it. It'll fill your stomach and not provide many calories, so not much nutrition either. If any of you know better, you're welcome to say so. Anybody? But you can. All right. Governments began to get involved in housing, and the role of government was expanded. And again, folk, I'm not always saying this was right, because at what point will it get to where the government completely takes over? And the days, well, I don't know. The days when you can build a log cabin like Abraham Lincoln are over with. That kind of how they say. And an inspector would come out and say, wait, this does not have inside plumbing. This does not have inside lighting. This does not have ducting to duct clean air into your house. Oh man, this does not have the proper this or that or the other. And they would condemn it. Government became more and more involved. And unfortunately, at this time, sewage was piped into rivers, and that polluted the rivers greatly. That has changed as time has gone on, but at least the sewage was gotten out of the city, and they thought, well, you know, the river can take care of it, but the rivers were not big enough to take care of all the sewage that was dumped into them. But again, we now have sewage treatment plants. We get into what you call mass society. Mass society where the people live together, and they're influenced. Now, folks, this is not as true as it was, but they were influenced a lot by the newspapers. Newspapers tried to get everybody to think alike. Now, the reading of the newspaper is somewhat out of style. I'm aware of that, and we get our news, if we get it at all, from some other source. But the newspapers would begin. Oh yeah, mass society, among its features was free public education for everyone. So public schools were opened up, and everybody would learn to read. And I will say this, folks, about free public schools. You cannot put an airplane together with workers who cannot read or do small sums. There are certain jobs to an airplane where a person has to be able to add 1/4 plus 1/3. The answer is 7/12. Many of you know how I got that. 1/12. Okay, one of it is not in your head. You know how I arrived at that. But we'd have to take tests from time to time to prove that we could do those kind of arithmetic problems. And of course, the higher persons had to know algebra and trigonometry and higher mathematics, geometry included. But you had to have people have basic education. And again, even to drive a car, you have to be able to read the signs. And because we're getting more and more people who don't know English, instead of using words, we're having signs that have symbols. The 8 octagonal sign always means stop, whether it has the word stop on it or not. And it's always red. Hopefully all of you know what I'm talking about. The lights overhead, if it's a red light, it means stop. If it's a yellow light, unless you're right too close to stop, it means prepare to stop. The green light means you can go. Hopefully every one of you have a good idea what I'm talking about. But we have to have some kind of a universal understanding, and we have to agree at least on some things. Anyway, that's part of a mass society. Newspapers would present grisly crime details often, present gossip, and present sporting events. Armies were built by the draft, or otherwise known as conscription. Large urban population. There was mass leisure activities in the big cities. Every big city got to where after a while it had its baseball team. That was not true in Europe. Baseball was an American sport. In Latin America it was soccer, and still is a lot. But it gave the people something to talk about. I mean, you know, how well is Babe Ruth going to do this year? I wonder if the Yankees will win another pennant. I mean, I'm not talking about the 1920s. In the 1890s, one of the more famous ball players was a man named Billy Sunday. And we got Cy Young, won 511 games. I seriously doubt he could do that today. Those pitchers could pitch every third day. When I was young, they pitched every fourth day. Today, a pitcher only pitches every fifth day. And then, most of the time, rarely does a pitcher pitch a complete game. He's expected to throw fast and hard every pitch he makes. And he only lasts a few innings before he has to be taken out. All right. Children were kept out of factories. Compulsory education, child labor laws kept the children out of factories. Working hours were shortened. The 8-hour day became standard. I think I mentioned how that my great-grandfather had to work 72 hours a week. Eventually the 40-hour work week became the standard. And if they worked you more than that, they had to pay you time and a half. Or double time for a Sunday. Now, again, Zionism was a response to anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, as I mentioned, is hatred of Jews. But the Jews, in response, formed an idea called Zionism, which said, let us all go back to our old homeland of Israel, the land of the Bible, and set up a nation in Israel. The Zionist movement, though, could not really get off the ground because the Arabs controlled the region, and the Arabs were strongly anti-Jew. What really gave Zionism the boost, and this was something Hitler never intended, was Hitler's Holocaust, where he killed 6 million Jews in Poland and Germany. That gave Zionism the boost it needed to get them actually moving. And they went to Israel in spite of the fact that they were not welcomed by their neighbors. But Zionism was a movement that said, let us Jews go back to Israel, the homeland of our ancestors. And there build up an army, and there protect ourselves. I mentioned how that Clara Barton made nursing popular among American women. Now, Maria Montessori. Started the Montessori schools, which still exist. And the Montessori schools said that, and I think I have to agree with her at this point, not all children can learn at the same pace. Some children can learn how to do long division at 8 years old, and some can't learn it till they're 11, and then some maybe can't learn it all. But let each child learn individually at his own pace, and some are slow, some are fast learners. So she started the Montessori school. Now, on a personal note, your book says that she's considered the first modern woman, or new woman. She went to an all-male school to get her she received her medical degree. And she decided that marriage is for the birds, I'm not going to have any part of it. But then she became infatuated with a male doctor, and she became pregnant. When she had her son, she adopted the son out, And she told the doctor who had fathered the child, he said, let's us be friends for life. And he agreed to be friends for life. But then she told him, but I'm not going to marry you. I'm never going to have sex with you again. Well, he found a woman who was willing to marry him. But this woman said, I know about Maria Montessori, and I'll marry you if you promise me that Maria Montessori will go out of your life. The doctor thought, well, you know, that seems reasonable. So Maria Montessori went, and this doctor married a woman who was willing to marry him. Maria Montessori, though, did something that is very difficult to do today. She eventually called her son out of adoption and set up a relationship with her son. Now, that's difficult because a lot of times today when an unwed mother will adopt her child out, they lose complete track of the child or never around it. What's that?
It's like a closed adoption, like
Closed, yeah. You can never call that child back.
Mm-hmm.
And folk have not mentioned this, but I will now. The decision to abort is irreversible. Maria Montessori's decision to adopt turned out to be reversible in her case, and she and her son became close friends for life. He never married, she never did either. But again, adoption is sometimes irreversible also.
Okay, let's speak on that though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I was adopted actually. I did not know my biological parents, but about 2 years ago, there was a lady that has a business and she's able to find. And I was able to find my biological sisters on my biological father's side.
Many a person.
Yeah.
I mean, well, Steve Carlton was a very, very star pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies. And one day when his career was over, he had millions of dollars saved up. He went looking for his real father and found him. His real father was a drunken whatever, drunken bum, but nevertheless he found. There's a lot of, and also they're saying it's important to know because, in my case, my dad died of a heart attack. Well, then I need to be aware of that because I might get a heart attack myself. So I'm very careful to watch my cholesterol level, to take my cholesterol medicines. My grandfather's died of cancer. Well, again, I'm very much aware of that. But you need to know what your relatives have died of because you might have a tendency to get the same thing. All right. Now, compulsory attendance laws. Now, folk have avoided saying this for a while, but I'll say it now. At one time in Western culture, the public schools worked. Today, I really have to say that the public schools are dysfunctional. Having taught in a public school for 5.5 years, when I had my own children, I homeschooled them, and 2 of them got college degrees. The son, they elected not to go, it was his choice. But he knows how to read and write and do some simple arithmetic, which I'm not sure what he would learn in a public school. In a public school, the kids there will put pressure on your children to conform to their ways. In other words, if you don't smoke, they'll try to ridicule you until you start. And once you start, you're hooked. Hopefully, and if you don't do as they do, you're ostracized from society, from their society. This is called peer pressure. The public schools today are sometimes called America's failing public schools, and more parents are taking their kids out. Just this year, last year, my oldest daughter taught at a public school in Athens. She'll probably never do that again. I warned her of the problems with it. She was terribly mistreated. She was threatened by the students. There are more than 100,000 assaults made on teachers every year, by pupils, other teachers, or parents. I think I woke some of you up. I mean, if you don't like what I'm saying, folk, I had someone, report me for saying something. Folk, arguing if you want to, but it is true. Unfortunately, it is true. The public schools once did work and once educated children, and the worst thing that happened in public schools was when the federal government got involved. Now, today the federal government is trying to put it back to the states after the No Child Left Behind Act failed in its attempt to keep any child from being left behind. the federal government finally largely gave up on educating, and there was an attempt made to do away with the Department of Education in our federal government and turn it back over to states. Children are better educated if it's turned over to the parents. I feel like my wife and I did a better job than the state would have. But anyway, I told my daughter, I said, your mind has changed about a lot of things. One thing, teaching in a public school, probably for those of you who have a liberal bent, will make you more conservative and make you believe in a lot of things you otherwise didn't believe in. All right. Anyway, education did improve at this time. More and more people started attending secondary school. At first, grades 1 through 5 are required. Then they started requiring more and more school. Secondary school and then high school. High schools used to teach Greek and Latin. Then they started teaching more practical subjects like science and foreign languages. Yes, I took Spanish in high school. I took Spanish in college. And in my old age, I've started trying to study Spanish again in an attempt to try to keep my mind sharp. I still can't hardly, I can hardly say como está usted. But, some of you might know what I just said. You know what I just said, yeah. If you don't. But again, why Spanish? Well, because it's, in our part of the hemisphere, it's the second most spoken language there is. Armies felt like they needed educated soldiers. Now, folk, when I was in the Army, they said that our soldiers the manuals were comic books, and there was a lot of truth in that. But the comic books told you how to service a tank, how to service a gun, a weapon. They'd use comic books. I don't know if that's still done or not. In the United States, I know it's about break time, the first professional baseball team was the Cincinnati Red Stockings. No, that's not the Cincinnati Reds. The Cincinnati Red Stockings moved to Boston and became the Boston Red Sox. And then the Cincinnati team formed, in Cincinnati they got another team together they called the Cincinnati Redlegs. Today they're the Cincinnati Reds. But a lot of folk, most people in Cincinnati know that Cincinnati had the first professional team. The Cincinnati Red Stockings won 58 games, but then they played Brooklyn, and finally a team from Brooklyn beat them. And the Brooklyn team was not professional. But anyway, today the gap between professional players and ordinary players is so great that, I can't imagine hitting a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. But then again, as they say, the most difficult feat in athletics is hitting a fastball, a curveball. And folk, I'm convinced, you can only do it if you're given the right genetic combination at birth. Basically these men who make the teams are born, they're not made. Now, I had a girl say, "If you can do anything you want to if you try." Believe that if you will. You cannot make a frog fly no matter how much you try to make him hop. He won't fly. You do what you were born to do. And again, I'm convinced that hitting a fastball at going 90 miles an hour, hitting it consistently and hitting it with power is a gift that you're given and not something you can develop or earn. All right. Okay, folk. Be back in about 10 minutes. Wait. While I'm thinking.